Mr. Auchincloss.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to start by submitting for the record a page from the China Task Force report that the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Congressman McCall, issued last Congress. And this section from the China Task Force report recommends doubling basic research funding over the next 10 years. And I welcome that recommendation. It's a good one. That same Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, voted for the CHIPS and Science Act, which would also substantially increase funding for basic research over the next 10 years. So with our voice and our vote, Republicans and Democrats have both said that we should be increasing funding for basic research over the next decade. And yet it's with great regret and disappointment that we're seeing the appropriations reports from this Congress cut, as my colleague Congressman Khanna laid out so compellingly, cut our funding for basic research. My greatest concern, and we've heard here from you in particular, Mr. Evanina, compellingly about the theft of our innovation, but frankly, my greatest concern is that if we stay on this trajectory, we're not going to have anything left to steal in a decade. We need to fund our basic research, not cut it as we face great power competition. In this vein, for you, Mr. Wolf, we heard from the previous member, my friend from Kentucky, this analogy with taxpayer-funded basic research funding to sort of crowding out private investment. And this is a well-known economic theory where public subsidies can sometimes crowd out private investment. And I would submit that this is an incorrect understanding of how basic research funding works. It's not zero-sum, it's positive-sum. The more we do, the more spillovers there are, and the greater the surface area for commercialization and innovation. Can you talk a little bit from your experience about how undirected, curiosity-driven, peer-reviewed basic research has become the seed corn for innovation now that is game-changing and life-improving?
Look, it led to, in biotech, discovery of CRISPR and gene therapies. It led to the invention and commercialization of the semiconductor, which now is geopolitically contested. It led to breakthroughs in material science for composites for defense.
And to be clear, the scientists who were first working on these technologies, did they have a specific outcome in mind? Were they linear? Were they trying to de-risk some future product? Or were they curiosity-driven and simply loved to explore?
Mostly the latter, although I would qualify that they were ego-driven. Scientists want to be famous, they want to beat their peers, but they're not driven by the profit motive.
Now, does it pay, though, to be ego-driven or curiosity-driven, or do you need some taxpayer support to do that?
You need taxpayer support.
Thank you. Can we continue, Mr. Wolf, on precision manufacturing? As we consider ways to de-risk critical supply chains, how can we build on the incentives that we've created for precision manufacturing in semiconductors, aerospace, defense, biotech, and other critical sectors?
I'll give you one specifically in defense because I think it's critical. There's about 3,000 mom and pop shops, which basically are today's Freedom Forge, the ability to manufacture critical components for aerospace and defense companies, the cutting edge ones from SpaceX to Blue Origin to Lockheed and Raytheon and beyond. We had an entrepreneur who actually said, why don't we roll up some of these groups? His name is Chris Power. He's a great patriot. He's Australian. Came to the U.S., started a company called Hadrian in California, and we're an investor, as are some other VCs. And he has one mission, which is I want to build the machine that builds the machines. He wants to have a cutting-edge, autonomous factory, and he's building it. And the pipeline and of customer demand is off the charts. I'm grateful for entrepreneurs like that who identified a problem, and he is recreating that new generation of Freedom's Forge. I think it's critical for our competitiveness and for the defense industry.
Thank you. And I'll close with you, Ms. Gorman. You had a very short segment in your written testimony, and I appreciate that you listed out all the recommendations. That's always helpful. Where you talked about a human genome-style project for democracies as we try to both contest CCP malevolent actions regarding gene editing, but also prepare our own way for what I think is going to be the defining technology of the 21st century, which is gene editing. Speak more to that, because it was a brief segment.
Well, we face this, in some sense, a competitive disadvantage because the PRC has no bones about collecting genetic information on the entire world, whereas as democracies, we don't do that. We need to protect that information. And so when we talk about leveraging our competitive advantages of allies and partners, one thing that we can do is build these grand international experiments like the Human Genome Project in biotechnology, using biodata and do that in a secure and privacy-enhancing way.
Similar to how we did CERN with particle physics, or how we do the telescopes internationally, we could do something like that for
exactly,
genome.
for liberal democracies, and set a standard for what responsible innovation looks like.
Thank you. I yield back, Chairman.